Next episode of Dialogue 340. We're here with Darren the Bear Jobs, as you can see. Michael, our wonderful co host, and I have the utmost pleasure of talking with two of what I consider they span the spectrum of cultural understanding in the Virgin Islands, the illustrious and exquisite Chalana Brown, and the elegant and stately Mr. Abdul Ali. And today we're going to be talking about pride. You know, what does it mean to have pride in the Virgin Islands? What does it mean to be a proud Virgin Islander? And because we want to condense so much, we're going to jump right in. So I'm very thankful that I have the two of you here with us today because, like I said off camera, Mr. Ali, you said you started back with Doc James.
Doc James, yeah, many
Could you tell
years
me a
ago.
little bit about that? When you first started out, what did you see in the community? What did you see in the news world? And what was that environment like?
Well, that was really very exciting. I had just come back from England. I'd been there for 17 years. And then I called a guy called Al Lynch. He's passed on now. And he said, come on the radio. So I came there, met Doc James quite a bit. And he was the one who really explained cultural life of the Virgin Islands and the things that he saw was important. He made some jokes. Every program, Doc James made some jokes. And I've been thinking that we should try to get some of that back on these days. So in some ways, we're not doing as much as past. I would like to see in terms of those kinds of cultural setting, cultural jokes, which really define people in the Virgin Islands. So, and maybe that has to do a lot with things which have changed over the years. We're now into AI, and you can do all sorts of things which you couldn't do before. So the culture is there. The big thing about culture for Virgin Islanders, I think, would be festival. Of being with broadcasting for WSTX. Every year the festival is big. People turn out in style to really perform and show that they appreciate that. And I think that that's a big thing. That's not going to go away. We may have to work on some other areas, though.
Okay. So, and I'm going to make this slight joke. I'm not offending anybody. He remembers when festival was a more covered experience. And next to Mr. Ali is the exquisite Chalana Brown. Tell me a little bit how you started in terms of news and community engagement and just how did you start out?
Yeah, well, I'll go as far back as to say pageantry. Pageantry was different. What I really truly love about pageantry in the Virgin Islands is that it's not like beauty focused. So like in Venezuela, you get trained really hardly for your outward appearances. And in the Virgin Islands, it's about like the lovable person inside. Usually people who have great burst of personality, who are very theatrical, we value that more. So I got myself started through pageantry. And then, you know, it gave us opportunities when you run for pageants at those times. You just didn't show up at the pageant. You went to government house, you went to events, and it enabled you to be a better communicator. It gave you a lot of experiences. You got to go on the radio. So through pageantry, that's where I found myself engaging in communication. And then I went further into high school, and I was heavily into fine arts. And then when I got to college, you know, I always wanted to be a filmmaker, honestly. And the truth about what I was hearing previously in other recordings of this great platform is that, you know, people don't really believe that you have the aptitude to do something because we come from a small space. And so I at that moment, I didn't feel I had that thing to be a filmmaker. And then I said, okay, my school doesn't have a film program, but it has a communication program. And so I went into communication, but I really wanted to be like a filmmaker.
Awesome. So I don't have to question if you two are proud of being a Virgin Islander because you're adorning the culture now and carrying it forward, and you've been reporting and engaging with the culture for so many years. But from what you're seeing in the community, do you think we have communal pride as Virgin Islanders anymore? Or has that been changing a little bit?
Well, I think that it's like a lot of things. it grows. You know, you were born as a child and then you grew up and you became an adult. And people are now looking at so many different ways in terms of how they can secure their pride for a period of time. And we have a lot of things that could get in the way of the pride. The economy, your love for work, the future, and things of this particular nature. And perhaps a really important question for us to look at is to ask ourselves, why are we here on the face of the earth? I think it's really very important for us to determine that whether we like it or not, we're here to pass things on. And so in that context, we really need to be clear as we can, about what we're passing on, because the children that come behind us are really going to be the leaders of today. So that's a fundamental question. And if we do one thing today, would be to really to try to encourage people to see that we are passing it on. It's not a question whether that is happening. It's what are we passing on, and how that is going to be used in a kind of way that our children can continue with the torch that they need to carry and leave us at the end of the day with feeling a good sense of pride in terms of what they stand for. So the pride business, it's in us, and we got to try to continue to work it out in a meaningful kind of way.
And Chalana, I know you're kind of, this is your 9 to 5 is researching, not adhering, but researching and promoting and trying to bridge the gap between what the culture is, where it is, and where it's going. What do you see in that transition? How is it being passed down? How is it being carried forward?
There are like some definitions and words I want to put out. So like if our community can start talking about being heterogeneous or homogeneous, those are two big words. Then there's enculturation, acculturation, and assimilation. So those are like really important words that we should be discussing all the time. So I think that we have a lot of pride in Virgin Islands, but at different age groups and also ethnic groups, we're experiencing it differently. So everybody's experiencing culture, but sometimes I think we're not experiencing culture as a whole together. We're experiencing it in pockets. So how you experience your Virgin Islands pride, somebody else doesn't experience it the same way. And that's because of the social backgrounds of persons and also age. So like for me, I have great aunts that were born before the transfer. They've passed away, but I experienced them. And so they're very engulfed in like culture that wasn't American yet, you see? And so I have pockets of that in me. There's persons who are now entering our territory that are Filipino. There's persons who are Venezuelans. There's Dominicans coming into our territory for the last like 30, 40 years. And so they're experiencing culture like differently. And so assimilation and acculturation are like kind of like being entwined. And so I don't know if we're experiencing culture homogeneously, but like heterogeneously, and there's goods about that, and there's also bads about that.
Okay, well, I don't want to like sideline my other co-hosts. Y'all could jump in. I'll keep picking their brain all day long. But before they do, could you touch on that? What may be some of the bad ways of people experiencing culture in their pockets, in their own perspectives?
That we don't align and we don't have a vision for who we are as a whole, and that everybody may be doing things that best suits their pockets of persons. And then that causes for us to not to align and opportunities for our young persons. And then we get into what I heard in the other conversation about networking and getting opportunities because of who you know, because we're operating singly other than in whole and tangent with each other. And I'll just use like my experience. I had the experience to go to Denmark, and I'm sure Denmark has like, they're highly politically driven. Their citizens, they give them a lot of voice to talk about things that that they think is important and relevant. So they're very community oriented. Okay, so for me, like Denmark, the people are very one-ish. So they have one drive everybody's kind of like sort of similar. And they don't, to me, Denmark doesn't really care about race, they care about you being Danish. So in the United States, you could be African American or Korean American. Like, they don't believe in that. They just believe in like being Danish, right? So that's a beautiful thing, but it also erases people's dualities. So, in saying that in oneness, they're a very clean country. Like, they know exactly what they want. But for spaces that are operating heterogeneously, and I would say the United States is heterogeneous as well, it's like you'll see like a calamity and confusion coming in. Because we're trying to define now, for a long time, our country is changing. We're trying to define like what is American, and everybody's coming in with different experiences, and we are an American territory, and so we're like experiencing that here too on this ground level. So it could be a beautiful thing, and it could also be like a calamity all at once.
Yeah, I could definitely could see that. Guys?
Okay, so going back on the topic of are you proud to be a Virgin Islander? I am proud to be a Virgin Islander as a multi-generational Crucian and have all sides of the Virgin Islands in my blood. Literally. I can say I'm proud to be it, but I'm also not proud of the Virgin Islands, and I'll explain what I mean by that. If you look at our history, we haven't been as inclusive to other groups of people. We have isolated people. We have, separated them, and we wanted to just be this one experience. But the thing is, with culture is meant to shift. It's meant to expand. It's meant to also include different groups. So I think we haven't done a good job, and that's why we see like you mentioned, the different pockets where they stay separate because it never felt included. It never felt welcome. We could talk about, different things that happened in the past. And, it's just, I think we didn't do a good job. And honestly, we're still not doing a good enough of a job. So that's why there's people that, they might have been born here or maybe be first generation or second generation, and they'll refer to themselves as I am from this particular island or this particular country. They don't say I'm a Virgin Islander majority of the time. Now they might do it if they go away, everybody, Uber Circle Cruise or whatever you want to use example, they'll say Virgin Islands, but when they're here, they want to make sure that they differentiate themselves as what their where their parents are from or what the case is, because we haven't done a good enough job. So I would say, me personally being proud as a Virgin Islander, but I would say Virgin Islands in totality, we have not done enough of a job. And that's why people are probably not proud to say they're a Virgin Islander at this current time. So that's my 2 cents right now.
And for those who might not be catching what he's referencing, Mr. Ali, correct me if I'm wrong. Chalana, you could jump in. I think what he's referencing is when you had the mass migration, when the Virgin Islands courts deemed that the government of the Virgin Islands had to educate everybody here, and there was a mass influx. I think that was around the time where Hess was starting to boom, and you had people coming in. And then I remember stories where when the Rastafarian movement was catching wind, that I had some old Rastaman tell me how they used to go around in buses trying to collect them. I didn't even know that was true. And then I remember both from my family and other individuals that when a lot of the Eastern Caribbean folks started to try and integrate, it was rough. Mm-hmm. And I've heard it from the lips of people who remember that experience as young children, being told that they're gaso and garat and all kind of stuff. Miss Ali, could you speak a little bit to what that history was like?
Yeah, well, I imagine that at that particular time, I was in England, so I just sort of heard about it as we go along. However, things have changed over a period of time. You have quite a number of people here from different parts of the Caribbean. I know that on my radio program, I always shout them out and say, Chebe Wed Sakafe. And those would be people from Dominica and St. Lucia, particularly. So I think the mixing in is going on, and what we have to do and even this can be done through education as well, because there's some things which not happening in education which should happen, like the teaching of VI, history, culture, and so forth. It's still not in the curriculum. And so there is a need for that to happen. But in the meantime, the rest of us, those of us in the community, should do what we can to encourage people to see each other as another human being. Part of the problem that we have as human beings in general is that a lot of us always feel as though we're better than other people. We're better than them because of our color, because of the way we speak, the money we have, etc. My take on it is that we're all colored. And all the colors, it doesn't matter, because if you go to Puerto Rico, you would see people with a coloring. If you go to the Philippines, you would see them. You can see them right away. They're shorter and the face and everything. Well, yeah, you could tell right away, roughly, where they're from. So we need to really look at where we are in terms of the rights of other people to be able to exist, and that if we're going to have power and control, and that's really very important, the power and control should be tied in to really helping other people to improve and enhance the quality of life. But this is a problem which has been around for some time. It's happening now. Even there is some thinking now of certain things that we want to do here, the constitutional things, and the U.S. is saying, well, you do whatever you want, but you got to be tied in to us here because we're the U.S. So there's some work that needs to be done, and we need to continue to educate people that all of us have rights, children included, as long as they recognize that parents got rights too, and to do whatever we can to promote the understanding of who we are, our history, our background, and what we need to do. And I'm going to end up just now. When we talk about slavery, I know the law says that we're supposed to have that in schools and so on. The only thing I would add to that is that we also need to talk about forgiveness. We don't want the slaves, or in our minds, to be thinking they treat us so bad that we got to do them 10 times as bad. But along with the forgiveness, it got to come the whole business of reparations. So whatever the behaviors and so forth have been over a part of time, there is a price to pay for that. And we need to sit down and talk. The good sister mentioned the Danes. Talk to them about it. They were the last ones here, and to see what could be done. They could help us with our energy situation. They got one of the best energy plants and power in the world.
Yeah, they do. They have the ones out in the ocean. And
Man,
stuff
I
like,
tell you,
yeah.
we could learn from that.
Anything on that?
Such a heavy.
I
I
know,
wasn't even
tough.
speaking. It was such a layered question. I go back to history. Plantation owners in the Caribbean didn't just own plantations in the Virgin Islands. Like, they were hugely tied to other Caribbean nations. And the talk about like persons, and I'm relating to what you were speaking about with different persons of the African diaspora in different islands. So even with you, and you spoke about being an ancestral Virgin Islander, being multi-generational, like the identity of a Virgin Islands cannot be just rooted in persons who come from from this space, because if a plantation owner from St. Martin or Antigua had a plantation here, and say cholera broke out and they lost a number of persons, they would bring in enslaved persons, and it's very important for us to also use the word enslaved, because nobody was born a slave, but you made into being enslaved. They would bring persons here. So we see that a lot. We see a number of Bajan persons coming in after 1848. So the identity of a Virgin Islander cannot be rooted in African people who are brought here to the Virgin Islands and solely only mated with other persons who are from the Virgin Islands. Secondly, there is that really big conversation, and I am myself gaining more aptitude about it. It's decolonization. We need to look at ourselves as the African Caribbean diaspora. And when we start looking at ourselves as that, we're all coming from Benin, we're modern day Nigeria and Ghana. We'll see that our identities are closely belated, and we need to let go of colonization thoughts that pit us against each other. But colonization has played a role in our identities. And so I don't want to deny that, because those are the things that make you beautiful, like your linguistics. Those are the things that make you beautiful because they're your linguistics. So it's like hard to deny the things of the past that make us all really different in our African identities as African Caribbean people. And so I think we need to engage in decolonization, like in Cuba. I know that Cuba is not the best friend to the United States, and we are an American territory, but in that rapid movement where they worked on who their identities was, and I think we can't leave other entities to like do that work for us. That's not their responsibility, actually. It's our responsibility. So I think we need to address our Afro-Caribbean identities, like literally, and it's our responsibility.
Michael, you got something before I jump back in? What I'm hearing from you is very interesting, because I feel, and it ties into my next question, I feel like that ability to look back, to get a sense of identity, to find a foundation in your culture, I feel like that is slowly slipping further and further in our periphery because of social media and the inundation of American culture through social media into the Caribbean mindset and into the Caribbean space and into the Caribbean conversation. That I think we talked about this on a previous episode of offline. The way we dress now, more and more it looks more like the States, so much so that I don't know if someone's coming or going. Because you remember, oh, you just came off the plane. We know when you just come off the plane. We could smell American Airlines on you. Or you going to the plane because you don't dress like that here. Chalana, more so for you, you're very active in social media. Are you seeing a difference because of some of the things that are being posted, the things that are being shared, the TikToks, the Instagrams? Are you seeing a difference, or are we still trying to hold on to it or cruisianize social media?
I think we're cruisianizing it because it's never going back. It's never going back. I'm not going to be able to fight against an entire Americanization. I think those are the words that I discussed before about enculturation, acculturation, and assimilation. Acculturation is occurring, but it's just gearing towards assimilation where there's no dualities. I believe in dualities a lot. And I have to big up to like persons like Kicking It with Kyra James, West Girl, East Girl, all the persons who are really trying to put forth in a very modern and digital way where you recognize that you can't fight this big power, but we're trying to acculturate. I'm not afraid of acculturation, but I'm very afraid of assimilation. And there's like a generational gap, right, where I'm a person of a certain age, and so I can remember experiences. I could still remember my great aunt born before the transfer and her experiences, like sitting, talking, making Johnny cake with her. There's a whole next generation that doesn't have that. What they know is what they see on TV and experience. So it's like we have to do more as persons of certain ages to engage them. And like they said in a previous episode, somebody was talking about teaching. And I think we're going to have to step up to this space and engage students and young people in a different way. That's the principles of Sankofa. Like, a generation is responsible for helping another generation along. It's like your citizens' responsibility.
So Darren, hold me back about to lean in. Brady's, Harvey's, Kim's, Brow Soda, Island Dairies.
Yes.
Y'all feeling me?
Yes.
I got a passion fruit recipe, by the way, but I ain't sharing it. I want to tie this into the economy of a culture. Food for us is a very big thing. And all of those that just rest in peace of what I just said, they were part of our culture. Island Dairies spans me all the way back to my grandparents. Brow the same. I heard about, and you know they used to tell us that our brow don't taste good because they remember the brow in the marble bottle.
Yep.
Mr. Ali, I think you're part of that generation. My brow tastes good. But Brady's, Kim's, Harvey's, they're gone. How much of our economy supports our culture and allows us to now export our culture. And that's the thing. Living in Florida, I could buy Goya canned beans. You see what I'm saying? My friend who's a Dominicana, I need the, wait, is the Viveres, yes. She can buy her cheese anywhere in a major city because she can go to a Caribbean market and find the cheese that's for frying and she does with onions. So I'm saying she can still purchase her food culture in a foreign land. But I don't know how much of our culture is supported in an economic way that we can both enjoy it here locally because it's dying, as well as even if we went away. I'm going to just leave that right there.
Status issues.
Is that status?
It
I just hungry.
totally is into status because those countries you just spoke about are independent countries, so they can do those sort of exporting stuff. Like, you gotta think about who we are as the Virgin Islands. Like, from the time the 1917 transfer occurred, you remember the reason why historically we have so much great records in the Virgin Islands about our identities, which is always tied to plantation. So don't think that they had great records because they truly cared about the enslaved person. It was tied to business. We were never a nation. It was the island was a island space to produce. So the island was a business, not a nation. And then when we lost that, and you're going into the 1917s, the Americans are looking at us like, okay, what it could do for us. Like, so we became an industry of pleasure. So come and vacation. So they never meant for us to be big exporters of anything. We're the playground. So those spaces that you talked about, that's not what their idea for us is. Those are up to us to make those expansions, work in Congress to make it that we are a viable society, but that's not their responsibility. They're telling us that we're not. We keep asking, like, why we don't have this? Why? It's status. Why do we keep asking that at this time we don't know that? We are strategically in a U.S. space because we serve as a military arm to the Caribbean, to the United States. So we have to recognize, like, who we are in tangent to our larger colonial force. And people say colonization is over. It's not. We're still colonized.
Question. Do you remember Brady's? Oh, yeah, boy. You remember St. Mary's School?
Of course.
Okay.
I grew up in town. So
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The little $5 meal I
Yeah.
used to hook you up with the lemonade and the Johnny cake and the fried chicken.
Yeah.
Ah, do you remember Harvey's? Bro.
Right.
Okay. So then let me shift this question to you.
So what's his favorite restaurant? What was
Exactly.
Your favorite, what is your favorite
What's your
restaurant
favorite
growing
restaurant?
up? Local, not something nationally.
I don't think I really can't even answer that question from growing
Where
up.
did you eat locally? Like, if your mom didn't cook. If your mom didn't cook, where would you eat locally?
That's a very good question because
Wait.
I can't answer that question because it might get in trouble and hurt some people's feelings. So I'm not going to plead the fifth on that.
Okay, number 3, like, okay, let's ask it a different way. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you wanted local food, where would you go?
You playing me out very hard.
Don't worry, man. They're going to
Answer
feed
the
us anywhere we go.
question.
They're going to feed us anywhere we go.
I'll be right. I'm not a big local eater, so you lose me out of that.
But say that because
Yeah, say.
that's a
It's
part of
his
the
palate.
conversation.
Yeah, he's being assimilated. That's assimilation. It was meant for that to occur.
So, okay, what looking at your generation, right? How do you keep the culture? What ways, what tangible, intangible ways do you see yourself and others of your same age space to say, this is how we represent, this is how we promote, this is how we keep the culture?
That's a loaded question because I think if speaking from my own experience, I mean, for me, I'm not a full-bred Crucian. I know that, my grandparents from my mom's side, they came from India to Trinidad as migrant workers, as public works and digging ditches. But that's where I get my culture from is like, I think when I'm not with my mom when I was growing up, I was always with my grandmother. So for me, I got my culture from her. Anything that she knows to cook is the things that I eat. So if y'all don't know, we are part Trinidadian. So for me, that flavor and that culture for food, that's ingrained in me. So, if mom don't cook and grandma cook, I happy. But, like, it's very different to be a Crucian because maybe accurately I don't know what it means to be a Crucian, but at the same times I get our music. Some may say that I am I'm being corny, but I do enjoy Quelby. I did enjoy scratch, whatever you want to call it. Those are the things that I know. I took part trying to learn my culture through quadrille dancing and doing maypole. I even had the experience of being able to interact with culture bearers through that, and even just spending time that I wouldn't regularly do with my grandmother and seeing the things that would go on in Trinidad. Like, it's crazy. This might sound corny, but for me, calypso is a big thing for my grandma. My grandma could tell you about Kitchener, Sparrow, Lad, Boiled Fish, all these other guys that was doing it. My mom could tell you about like Daddy Friday before the crossover with Eddie and the Movement. So I think those type of stuff is things I pay attention to learn my culture. I mean, for me, when it comes Christmas time, I love my American Christmas songs. I think they're classics, but for me, it's the Baron, it's Sparrow. You have King Abstinent, and you have
TSK, bro.
and Sunny and Tennessee was nice. It's the biggest one. Yeah, I know. Getting there, and I think that's the biggest one. Those are the favorite ones. I mean, I have all three. Trying to find album number 4. Waiting. But I mean, I think I find ways of learning my culture. How other people learn cultures, I think it very much depends on the place, the person, and the family. I mean, I know people that say they want to be Moko Jumbi, so they just jump headfirst into it. If you want to learn steel pan, Rising Stars, St. Patrick's Steel Pan Orchestra. So I think culture here in the Virgin Islands, you have to find it on your own. You do learn it in school, and maybe did it for like one semester, but you have to go beyond that. I mean, I went to UVI and I used to have classes with Malik Siku. He would, and we would go, and we would go back on, like I would have to submit an assignment, and then we'd end up going back and forward about what's accurate or what's not accurate, or this is how you should say it. Shouldn't say it like that. This is the history. Go look at this and read that and get back to me. So I mean, I think when it comes to young people as us, we have to go outside of our norms to look for culture and to understand it.
Wait, let me stop it. You said something important, right? You talk about your grandmother, right? So for us, normally that's the first line, right? We learn from our grandparents, right? And like you said earlier, they migrated through like Trinidad and stuff, right? But when they came here, they weren't really embraced to keep their culture, but also add to the Virgin Islands on top of it, right? Because I think what Chalana was saying, we can have both. That's the thing I think we haven't got. We can have both. We don't have to be exclusive, because there's some people that have that mindset. When you come here, you turn off that past culture. You come, and you gotta be ours, and we can be both. We have multiple, especially if your grandparents came from different places. You can't just tell somebody to shut out their legacy, what they came from. So I think this is my message to the Virgin Islands, like, let's embrace it all, and we don't have to force them to just choose. We all came from someplace, and culture just adds. Culture is supposed to be flexible. It's supposed to grow. It ain't supposed to look like it was in the 50s. It's supposed to grow and include different things. Like we're in a place where we're a literal melting pot. Probably the biggest melting pot in the Caribbean, if we're being honest. What other island has the collection of cultures that we have, or group of islands? Because we also got to include St. Thomas and John. I don't say my total message is, let's embrace it all and add to our culture.
But you know why I say this to say that? Because I agree with her. We are a melting pot. I know for me it's different because one side of my family, Caribbean, the other side, Native American and Afro-American, black, coming from Africa to America as slaves. I know that my grandfather's parents lived through to being liberated and freed and emancipated, to then living in probably one of the worst areas in the south of Mississippi, in the backwaters of the bayou, where you would be hung for the mildest of things. So I think for me, I got to spend time with my grandfather, and he would tell you all these crazy stories about things he saw as a kid. His mom was Native American, so she ended up working for a white man. His father couldn't really go any and everywhere, and then experiencing Jim Crow growing up, and even to the point where my grandfather, would really moved about and started educating himself about all these things that were going on and getting involved in the civil rights movement and meeting Malcolm X and getting the experiences of a lifetime with the Black Panthers and doing a lot of cool stuff. So I think we search for that culture. I mean, even my grandmother, she took that opportunity to come here by herself, but she found community with, it may not have started off with Crucians, but she found community with other people from other islands, from St. Lucia, Dominica, and all these other, to this day, the people that she met here are still alive and they know each other good, like really good. And it's amazing to see that you find community wherever you go. It may not be, it may take years, but you do find it. And I think that's like an interesting perspective as a young person. If you sit and you listen to some of the stories that are told, that like you find your culture and your community where you go. And I think that's accurate to say that we are a melting pot. And that melting pot, we need to just realize it's time to keep stirring and finding the right source.
Yeah, you gotta scrape the bottom for the dumpling. So, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to really dive into this conversation as much as we should. So, I have to do the horrible thing of wrapping it up. I want to thank my co-host. But before I close the door on this, I want to ask Mr. Ali, the exquisite and illustrious Chalana Brown. I can just keep pelting roses after you. What would be your last thoughts when you think about culture in the Virgin Islands and tomorrow? What are your last thoughts?
Well, I take a little issue with last thoughts, you know. But basically, you see, I am from Nevis, went to England because of the tie-in with colonialism and so forth. But I think that it's important for us to learn about our culture. It's important for us to share our cultural ideas with others because we're all human beings, and at the same time to recognize that everyone has rights and privileges. So I'm quite happy to share the Crucian way of life, culture, and so forth, because that's just the way things are. And I see what bits in there fit in nicely with me and what bits I have questions about, and that's fair enough. That's how I think it's supposed to be, a mixed scene.
Thank you. Shalana?
Yeah, I would always ask persons not to play a role in erasure. So I think that, you know, as people of color, we're very genius at, you know, what's the new thing. We're trendsetters. But also we have an issue with not, again, it's Sankofa principle of holding on to the past. We just move forward all the time, but the things that make us stronger is also learning from the past and taking things with us. And it's also about what gives validity to countries. So France is important, Spain is important, the UK is important. Why? Because they honor their past. They have biggest museum countries because they recognize the importance of the past and making their countries very valuable. And so I want that for the Virgin Islands as we are changing and in being more inclusive, that we also take the past with us and don't pick part of erasure.
Well, thank you so much. On behalf of the Dialogue 340 crew, bigging up Media One Productions because we look sharp, Jolie because they always give us a house, and we're gonna just keep on talking, but I could cut off the camera. So next time for Dialogue 340, so like I have the passion fruit recipe for real, like I really have it, Yes. Y'all cut, right? Okay, good. No, like I really have the passion fruit recipe. Full island dairies.